Welcome to Trends with Benefits, a podcast by Van Eck with a forward-looking perspective. We explore new ways of thinking about the markets, investing, work, and life. Here's your host, Ed Lopez.
Welcome to another episode of Trends with Benefits. I am your host, Ed Lopez, and joining me today is Dasarte Yarnway, recently named Investment News 40 Under 40, founder and managing director of Berknell Financial Group, an independent advisory firm that he started at age 24. Dasarte, thank you for joining me and speaking with me today.
Thank you so much, and thanks to your team. I'm so excited about this podcast interview. I've been looking forward to it all week, so I'm excited to get it done.
You're a young guy. How old are you now? 29?
Just turned 29 on June 12th.
And you've done so much, which is just super impressive. And I love to talk to people like you that have an entrepreneurial spirit and go out there and kind of really get things done. You know, before we kind of get into your business and your career, what I find really interesting is people's origin story. And I think people with that kind of passion and energy towards business, I feel like it has to come from somewhere. Maybe you can give me a little bit of background in terms of your family life and some of the things that have been driving you forward to this point.
So it depends on how far you want to go back. I like to start with my two parents. We're from West Africa, Liberia. My mother was born on the Firestone plantation. It's like a hidden story in Liberia where Firestone, who makes rubber tires for the cars that we drive, bought over 1,000 acres of land for 10 cents an acre. And my mother was born on that land. My father is born in the northeastern tip of Liberia in a county called Nimba County, right? So two super ambitious people that came to America after 14 years of civil war to try to give their 6 kids a better life, right? It's interesting to me to think about it because my mom would joke around sometimes and she'll say, hey, I didn't know we were leaving a war and coming into a new one. We lived in a project building where I was born, actually, called the Geneva Towers in San Francisco that has since been demolished. And growing up there, you had to be really independent and young and quick on your feet, you know what I mean? Because quite frankly, you wanted to survive. So in my efforts to survive, number one, and my effort to not put any additional stress on my mom and my dad, I kind of turned to entrepreneurship. I turned to how can I do this for myself? How can I get the shoes that I wanted? How can I do these things, right? And that's kind of where this came from. There was an event in my life, 2003. My father passed away to terminal prostate cancer. So at that moment, I took it upon myself. Now I have 5 sisters. I'm the only boy. I took it upon myself to say, well, hey, how am I going to make my dad proud, right? I began to play football. I began to really hone in on the sport. I began to study super hard. And I found my way at the University of California, Berkeley. Now I'm at Berkeley. I'm playing ball, and this is the Cliff Notes version of the story, right? I'm playing ball, and I get hurt, and I keep getting hurt, right? So not one time, not 2 times, but 3 surgeries I underwent at Berkeley. So at that point, staying committed to what I promised my father, right? I had to make a decision. What was it that I was going to do to make him proud, to represent our family name, and to not let their efforts in escaping a war and surviving go in vain? I shopped around a couple jobs. I went tech jobs, medical jobs. I tried all types of different fields, and I found my way to an RIA, right? One of the largest in the business. And from that moment, I felt like this was it. This was my calling. Because if my parents had this information, perhaps their experience in the United States would be a little different, right? Perhaps they could have had better retirements. Perhaps they could have made better financial decisions, right? That would have trickled down to us as kids, giving it back to the people that I thought needed it the most, right? The 99% that often is overlooked in this financial services industry. And I think that's where the journey towards Onward or Berknell started.
And so then you graduated Cal and found your way to financial services somehow.
Yeah.
How did that play out?
Yeah, so I applied to about 265 jobs. So when I go to my LinkedIn profile, it kind of tells you your history of what you've done on LinkedIn. And I see those early applications from 2012, 2013 of me just trying to figure out what I was going to do. So as I'm applying, a firm reaches out to me, right? And they're like, hey, we want to interview you. I'm on the phone like, I don't know any of this stuff, but I promise you, this athletic thing just shine through on the phone that I will work harder than anybody at the firm. I'll make sure that I take advantage of this opportunity, and I'll kind of show you what I'm worth, right? So like an undervalued security that gave me a shot. Right? And they said that we're going to let you prove yourself. We think that you have the fundamentals. We think that you have all that it takes to be great. We'll let you in. Now, when I get there, I see things that I like and I don't like, right? I see that the industry is catered towards this top tier group. I see that that leaves out a bunch of people that should be served. I see that I can make a difference by being here. I have a privilege to be at these tables and to have access to this information, so I can make a difference. So I decided to learn as much as I possibly could, right, with the intent on doing this.
And before you started your firm, did something stand out to you as eye-opening in terms of the way perhaps the rich manage money or the way they approach money that you didn't know before?
Yeah, I think what was made evident was the knowledge gap. The knowledge gap in certain communities, right? So the community that I grew up in, even some of my, what I considered at the time, more affluent friends, right? Like, oh, wow, you guys are doing this. You're going on vacation every year or whatever the case is. Like you have that privilege. They still had a knowledge gap. How is that possible, right? Why is that a thing? Why doesn't everybody have the information to make sound financial decisions? So in just talking to these people, it seemed like the multi-generational transfer wasn't just in money, but it was also in knowledge. And I thought that that was something that I could help within these different communities.
And then, so what year was it that you started Berknell?
I started Berknell in 2015. So after I worked at that firm, I went to a brokerage and I went to a big bank. I had another traumatic event there where my brother passed away. So I'm looking at this thing like, okay, you have one shot to do exactly what you want to do, right? You have one life to live, and while you can, do it. I was 24. I had just seen my seemingly healthy brother pass away, right? And at that point, I'm like, this is the time. This is the time for me to create something in which I can speak to the people who need to hear the message, give them the information, and build something great.
Now, I haven't obviously started a financial practice from scratch. What kind of obstacles did you run into, or did you have certain knowledge gaps that you needed to acquire just to kind of get started and hang that shingle?
For sure. I mean, we work in finance, right? So it's one of those things where it's the most regulated industry that there is. I had to find a place to custody the assets because I wasn't comfortable with saying, hey, clients, come with me. So I think the first obstacle was just, how am I going to house these clients' assets? Now, gaining the knowledge and knowing what to charge, what would be reasonable, handling my business taxes, all of those things were things that I had to learn early on, and just having a marketing tactic that I can speak directly to the clients that I wish to serve.
And when you started, did you already have kind of a business model in mind in terms of how you would approach pricing or client service, or is that something that just kind of has developed over time?
I actually had an idea of what that would look like, right? So for me, I knew that I didn't want to cut out the demographic that is underserved and overlooked. What I did do was I had a private client group with our firm, and I also had a wealth bridge group. So the wealth bridge group was my kind of me paying homage to this group, saying like, hey, we see you. We want to help you, right? And there's a home here at Berknell for that. So with the business model and the structure, we did the traditional stuff on the private client side. But with the wealth bridge side, we adopted the retainer model, which worked really well for those clients. So now it wasn't, hey, you need $1 million to work with an independent RIA. It was more so like, hey, we're here to invest in you. And hopefully over the long term, that investment will pay dividends towards our business. So in 2015, I think that we were on the forefront of this new subscription-based or retainer-based model in the industry.
Yeah. And it's good that you had different models within the shop, or different, would you look at them as channels, different business lines, if you will, depending on the client?
Yeah, we call them client groups here. So I wanted to definitely have people know once they hit the website, okay, I can work with this person, right? Because too often people go to financial services websites and they self-select themselves out of getting the information that they need to build the wealth that they want to build. But I wanted to make sure that verbiage was clear on the website to say like, hey, we are here for you, right? And this is how. So the Wealth Bridge Group was able to do that.
And as you're building this business, what was one of the biggest obstacles you had to overcome?
Being young, man. Being vocal, being a young African man in this space by yourself. Now, I think that oftentimes you see people that may be similar to me, but I had the backing of a bank to validate my credibility. I had the backing of the largest RIA to validate my credibility, or the brokerage, right? Very reputable on Wall Street, to validate, like, okay, he must know what he's talking about because he works here, right? But when you're that young, you have to create your credibility. You have to earn your stripes, right? You have to put in the hours or the reps for nothing so that people can look at you as if you can do the job. That was the biggest hardship for me, to say, hey, well, I might be young, right? Okay, my tie, I gotta adjust it a little bit, but I am the best person to serve you, right? And I think that's something that was a continual challenge for us in the business, and one we learned to work through.
Yeah, when we spoke before this recording, you talked about there was a time where you almost thought you might quit the business.
For sure.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And funny story, man. We started the business, opened the doors January 4th, 2016. Now, beforehand, right, there's a lot of planning that goes into business, as you know, right? So we're hitting the ground running. I think we did like a whole like East Coast, West Coast, I had clients on both sides tour to tell them in person that we would be starting Berknell Financial Group. So after that, we open our doors. We're working with one of the custodians, and I'm super excited to get the check because we put in all this work from the beginning of the building Berknell, right, to now, right? So on March 31st, I'm like, it's happened. We're gonna get a check with Berknell Financial Group LLC on it. A week goes by, no check. I'm like, okay, keep checking the mailbox. 2 weeks go by, no check. So I called over to the custodian. They put me on hold. They're like, let's go check on the check because you should have got it by now, right? They come back on the phone and they're like, sorry, sir, we decided to hold your check because the amount on the check is less than the paper we used to print it on, right? So that was my moment in entrepreneurship when I had to make a decision. Like, do I really want to do this? There's comfort and there's security back where I left. Or am I really committed to this cause of helping to impact the lives of the people that are overlooked and underserved, right? So I remember having a conversation with my mom, and on the phone with her, I'm complaining like, Mom, the check was like super low. They kept the check. I told them to send it to me anyway. It just got here. And she listened to me pretty much rant for about 25 minutes. And when it was her turn to speak, she said, D, keep the check. Do not cash it. Because 5 years from now, you're going to be thankful that you did not quit. And in that moment, I thought to myself, like, she might be right. We can do this. And to this day, that probably was one of the best things that could have happened to me, for her to speak life onto my business, onto my talents, onto my confidence, to wait for, everything that I was planting in the ground, those seeds to show themselves in their proper form.
Yeah. And you said that was how far into the beginning of your business? You said it was about a year in, or is that
about a quarter? Almost quarter in. That's
great. Moms are great, right? Well, let's go back and talk a little bit about Berknell athletes, if we can, because that's almost like a dream get for many financial advisors starting out trying to get professional athletes. It's typically hard to get. What stands out about professional athletes that is totally different than regular financial planning clients?
I think that their profiles, right? They're going to make a lot of money early on. And that's unusual for 90% of people to say, hey, I am 21, 22, and I'm going to make six figures, maybe weekly, right? When I step onto the NFL playing field. So what comes with that is a lot of pressure from family. What comes with that is a tendency to mismanage money. What comes with that is a lot of unnecessary hands that are trying to help, right? So you have your agent, your parents, right? A realtor, these different people that want to take your money. So with that, I call that lifestyle management, helping them manage this lifestyle that they've just been thrown into. That's a big part of it. And then education is not only saying, hey, we're going to maximize your playing years, but what happens after that? I want to be able to educate them not only on the market, on financial planning, but also kind of be a coach for them in terms of their careers and life after football. So it's been an interesting kind of group that we have, right? And I'm able to take them from seed to tree in terms of building their wealth and creating their goals.
Athletes as a client, if you will, do they seek you out, or would their agents seek you out? How does that relationship work, and how do you interact with agents in this world, in this realm, if you will?
So first, it was them seeking me out. Like, hey, I know you. We played. I read your stuff. I used to write a lot, right? So my business card was my weekly blog and the early books that I wrote, right? So they would see some of the stuff that I was writing, specifically to athletes. and they would reach out to me. Now, as I've matured in the business and our business has grown, I've partnered with agents that are like, hey, nobody is looking out for our athletes like you are, right? So we want to partner with you. As we sign more athletes, we want to begin to work with you early on before we get to the point of the direct deposits on a weekly basis, right? That come from the NFL or the NBA or whatever league that they play in. So that's kind of been the engagement thus far. And still, it's so complex. Every case is different. Every athlete is different. Every athlete has a different understanding of money. It makes for an interesting workday for sure.
Has anything totally surprised you about working with athletes that you perhaps didn't know before, didn't even realize?
Not necessarily surprised me, but now I know that these things are real, some of them, right? So I've had circumstances when like you would make a plan for somebody and they'll go out and buy a Bentley the next day, right? Something like that, right? Would happen. So
Yeah.
work, it's really it's a job that requires patience in some ways, right? But it's also very fulfilling to see somebody's knowledge gap be shrunk, right? It's just getting smaller and smaller over time, to see their wealth grow, to see them teach these things to their parents and have a better understanding. So I think that it's fulfilling, and that makes my job not a job at all.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's a great perspective too, to be able to go to work and it's not necessarily work for you. It's a passion project, if you will. There's one other aspect about your practice that I found really interesting. You have recently gone all digital.
Yeah.
Was there anything, if there's an advisor listening right now and thinking about going digital, what would you recommend to kind of watch out for? Were there certain software systems that you think they really need or other considerations?
I think that you have to make your clients feel like nothing has skipped a beat. So my big thing was contact. I wanted to make sure that I was making contact with my clients, no matter if it was in person or via, email, right? So those things haven't changed. They're going to have doubts. That's the natural thing. Your job is to fight those doubts. That's kind of my thing. How do you replicate that feeling? And for us, we've been able to kind of master that, especially during this time of quarantine.
Yeah, that staying in touch with people, and I think you've called it creating a community, has been really big with you. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, talk a little bit more about Berknell Town Hall.
Yeah.
And the importance of community in your business.
At the end of the day, I think that as humans, right, we all want deep, meaningful relationships, right? No matter what that may be. People don't come to advisors for the hot stock. They're coming because they trust you. They're coming because they like you. And they're coming because they value the relationship that you have with them, right? So for me, seeing that across my clients, I wanted to continue to invest in them by creating a community in which they could have ownership in. At the height of the pandemic, I came up with a concept called the Berknell Town Hall. And this Berknell Town Hall is me providing an event, if you will, in which they can take back some valuable information, provide a guest that can provide that information, and have my clients have ownership over this community and invite whoever they want to invite. So that's what we've done. We had the last one, I want to say, a month ago with Brian Portnoy. We have another one with Justin Forsett. He's an ex-NFL player, now entrepreneur. He's been on Shark Tank, right? And these are exclusive experiences that they probably won't get anywhere else, right? So I think that it's super cool for them. I think that it provides that value. It deepens our relationship, and, it gives this sense of community. My clients are doing business with my clients, right? And I think that makes a financial services firm way more valuable.
Some of the other things that you've done, one of the things I want to talk to you about was your books.
Yeah.
How many books do you have now? 3?
3 books.
3 books. Yeah. What was your first one?
The first book was called Dating Benji, Straight Talk on Improving Your Relationship with Money. That's my baby.
That's a great title, by the way. I love that, Dating Benji.
Dating Benji was focused on a person's relationship with money. So my job was to simplify the information. I felt like in the beginning stages of Berknell, to say, like, if you don't know anything about personal finance or investing, what are some things that you need to know? And I think that starts with everyone's root cause. Like, what's your relationship like with money? So we took on the theme of horoscopes and saying, like, hey, everybody has a personality, right? And you're dating. So how does that personality shine through in this relationship that you have with your money? And that was self-published, and it came out and it hit top 100 on Amazon. The top 100 or 50 spots are locked down by Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, Tony Robbins, right? The big names.
And you broke through.
through was huge for me. So that was the first book that I wrote. The second book was called Young Money: 4 Proven Actions to Design Your Wealth While You Still Can. And by still can, you know my background. I lost my brother. I lost my father. Our most precious resource, I don't care how old you are, is your time. How you spend your time is a extension of what you value. And the third one was also self-published. I released it last year on July 4th weekend. It's called Pay Me in Equity. And that speaks to a lot of our clients that are in the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond that have equity compensation. So as you know, that's a growing kind of vehicle that employers are using to retain top tier talent. But it has so many intricacies, right? Taxes are involved, right? Not understanding what these different options or these different investments are. So we simplify that in that book, and we give real life examples of people that have grew their personal equity.
You mentioned before that you've used to do a lot of writing. I don't know if you're talking about the books or just when you were younger, did you do a lot of writing?
I did. Two things stick out about my childhood when it comes to writing. So the first thing is I remember going with my sister. She's an avid reader, to a bookstore, and I'm just following behind her, kind of on her coattail, right? And we go into this Black-owned bookstore called the Marcus Bookstore, and she's picking out her books, and this lady looks across the room and kind of walks to me, and she looked me in my eyes like, "You're going to be a writer. Keep writing. It's going to change your life." And that sticks out to me. And I kind of left the store that day believing it, like, yeah, I can write. I'm going to be a writer, right? So the second thing is my mother, right? She worked weird hours. Either it was 3 in the afternoon or 3 in the morning, she would be going to work. So it was 2 shifts passing in the night. For me to communicate with her, sometimes I had to write a letter and say, "Hey, Mom, I did take out the trash. You missed it. I shouldn't be in trouble for this," or whatever the case is. So my love letters to my mom was my first take at writing books, right? And it just stuck with me. So now I still keep a journal. I still try to de-stress with writing, and I think that it's something that allows me to hone in on my voice. So I don't know if you'll ever read my book, but I'm going to send you one after this podcast.
I'd love it. Yeah, it'd be great.
You'll begin to hear me talk on paper, right? And I think that's super important as you build a business or as you communicate in general, for people to be familiar with the cadence.
Now, here's a weird question. Maybe it's not so weird, but when you journal, is it manual or is it digital?
It's manual. And this is interesting. I think that when you write something on paper, it comes to life, number one. The second thing is, I think that we internalize the things that we write down. So I'll give 2 examples, and I'll talk about this in Young Money. When a person takes a digital budget on any app that they choose, they kind of they put it in there like, yeah, I'm budgeting. But when it's time to grab drinks with your friends, you don't necessarily remember what you put in that app unless you're looking at it all day long, right? So I think you have to pair it up from a budgeting standpoint. But when you write that down, you begin to kind of feel the words. You remember the images on what you wrote down on your paper, right? And it becomes a deeper connection with what you put on that paper. So I think that for my writing, or personally, and just managing finances, I would recommend to everybody to write it down on paper first before going to digital.
So you're doing a lot of great stuff. Do you consider yourself a role model?
Role model, wow. I think that I'm using my life to encourage somebody to know that they can. So I don't know if that's a role model or not, but if anybody sees it that way, I want them to look at me and say hey, Dasarte did it, so I can too.
Yeah, I think that makes you a role model. I think you're a role model.
Dasarte tried it. He was successful. I can do it. It's possible because I saw somebody else do it. One of my friends says, Tyrone Ross, actually, you can't be it until you see it, right? So I want to be that person that they see and they're like, it can be done. I can start that business, right? I can manage my finances efficiently. I can buy real estate, right? And I think that it takes a lot of courage to think in that mindset. But the more people that do that, I feel like the more realistic it'll seem.
What is one long-term trend you see playing out over the next year or several years?
Are we just talking about in general?
In general. It could be anything.
In general, I think that there's going to be more independent financial services firms popping up. More and more people are leaving the kind of big wirehouse mentality and trying to find a home for themselves. And I think that technology is making that possible. So I think that's one trend in the industry that I see happening more and more.
And then we do a speed round. It's called Trend or Fad. I'll throw out a few different concepts. You let me know if it's, in your opinion, a trend or a fad. Day trading, trend or fad?
It's a fad.
Esports, trend or fad?
Esports?
Esports.
What is it?
Video gaming.
Oh.
For money.
It's a growing trend.
Live streaming workouts, trend or fad?
Fad.
You still like the physical activity, the real life activity?
Yeah, most people still like that. I think it's a circumstance thing, right? Right now.
Yeah. Running steps, trend or fad?
Running steps, what's that?
That's a Phil Perlman question, but that is that's run. He says that you run steps in stadiums up and down.
Yeah. Growing trend, and every morning I'm out on that university's campus, I'm gonna post it. So shout out to Phil. That's a growing trend.
And then lastly, social media, trend or fad?
Trend. I think that more people are gonna be on social media. My mom used to get mad at us for being on Facebook back in the day, and now she has every profile on every social media network, right? So I think that it's a trend.
Well, you're all over the place, so she's got to follow you, right?
Yeah, I guess so. That's my big fan.
Dasarte, this has been great. I really appreciate your time. What's the best way for people to find you?
People can reach out to me or find us at www.berknell.com. That's BERKNELL.com. Or they can tweet me at Dasarte Yarnway. That's DASARTE, last name Yarnway, YARNWAY.
Fantastic. Again, thank you very much. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Trends with Benefits.